and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Hundreds of flights in the US have been cancelled after airlines were asked to cut air traffic amid the ongoing government shutdown. Speaking on this, US Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has stated that the decision to cut the number of flights is about safety, not politics. Russia has stated that it is prepared to respond to Venezuela's requests for assistance, while it urges against any escalation of tension in the region. Russia has said that it wants the United States to clarify recent remarks by US President Donald Trump about the possible resumption of nuclear testing. Trump last week ordered US military to immediately restart the process for nuclear testing after a halt of 33 years. A liquefied natural gas tanker successfully outran pirates that approved the vessel in a speedboat off the coast of Somalia. This adds to worries of resurgence of piracy after years of calm. North Korea has fired ballistic missile towards the sea off of its east coast. South Korea's military has said that the suspected short-range ballistic missile was launched from an area in North Korea's northwest region near the Chinese border. The deadly typhoon Kalmaiki is now headed to West Cambodia and Laos. It has earlier barreled through central Vietnam, killing at least 3 people, while in the Philippines at least 188 people lost their lives. Tesla boss Elon Musk has had a record-breaking pay package that could be worth nearly $1 trillion approved by shareholders. The scale of the potential payout has drawn criticism, but the Tesla board argued that Musk might leave the company if it was not approved. The UN Security Council votes to lift sanctions on Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa. US Ambassador Mike Waltz said the move signals that Syria has entered a new era. In a significant development, Russia has announced that it is prepared to respond to any appeals for assistance from Venezuela amid rising tensions. This comes as U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reveals a new round of strikes targeting alleged drug trafficking vessels off of Venezuela's coast. The U.S. military's ongoing campaign in the region has already claimed lives of at least 70 people, with 18 vessels destroyed so far, while the U.S. has not provided concrete evidence of the drug trafficking activities of the vessels. Hegseth has emphasized the operations focus on dismantling designated terrorist organizations. These military actions have sparked controversy, with critics labeling them as extrajudicial killings, especially as many of the victims are reported to have been civilians, including fishermen. President Maduro of Venezuela has strongly opposed the U.S. actions, calling them part of an effort to destabilize his government. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international relations expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this, does U.S. military operations off of Venezuela represent a legitimate counterterrorism effort, or is it a violation of international law and sovereignty of Venezuela?
I think it's important to recognize at the outset that this is only superficially or nominally an anti-narcotics operation. This is about the United States, under the Trump administration, reasserting what it considers to be its legitimate sphere of influence in the Caribbean and Latin America, a sphere of influence which, as was the case back in 1962 in Cuba, today it's Venezuela, and we see Russia being involved in what many Americans consider to be America's backyard. We see China, the People's Republic of China, involved. We even see Iran involved in various ways. And so the administration in this country is signaling to the Maduro government, get back on board, Team America, or perhaps to bring down the Maduro government and replace it with the Machado government, which would be more favorably inclined to accepting the American sphere of influence. So drugs are the pretext. And against that backdrop, I think we can see what's really motivating Washington in all of this. It's not drugs, it's geopolitics.
Right. And Professor, now bringing Russia into this conversation, this discussion, as Russia deepens both its military campaign and in Ukraine and its geopolitical engagement in Latin America, is the world entering a new era of multi-front, power confrontation between Russia, China, and U.S.?
Yes, after the end of the Cold War, we enjoyed some of us this period of unipolarity, the unipolar moment. There was one superpower, the United States, and it kind of wrote the rules and expected everybody to follow them. And when they didn't, they policed that, as they did in Iraq, for example. But we've now entered a new era of multipolarity, of great power competition. Russia, a diminished great power, but still a great power, and trying to demonstrate that in Latin America. China, obviously a great power, the United States, India, others as well. So this looks more like 19th century Europe than it does the post-Cold War era. And against that backdrop, we see this is the best way to interpret what Russia is doing. It is trying to play the great power game in Latin America at what Washington perceives to be the United States' expense. I didn't mean to suggest that we're going to rerun the Cuban Missile Crisis, by the way. The Russians are talking about defensive weapons, of which they have precious few these days because they need them. The last time I checked, they're fighting a war in Ukraine, and they need all the weapons they have to prosecute that war. We're not talking about long-range offensive or nuclear-tipped weapons being deployed to Venezuela, but nevertheless, it's a clear signal from Moscow to Washington. We are still players. We're still a great power, and we are still going to plant our flag in your backyard, whether you like it or not.
Yes, indeed. Very interesting and great insight. Always great learning from you, Professor Andrew Latham. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Minneapolis. Now we move on to Europe. The Netherlands has officially declared centrist leader Rob Jetten as the winner of last week's general election, setting the 38-year-old on course to become the country's youngest ever prime minister. The Dutch Electoral Council has announced that Jetten won by just under 30,000 votes over far-right leader Geert Wilders, following an election seen as a test of Europe's populist wave. Jetten's D66 party secured 26 seats in the 150-member parliament, the lowest number ever for an election winner, while Wilders' PVV also won 26 seats. A total of 15 parties have gained representation, reflecting the Netherlands' highly fractured political landscape. Jetten has proposed a four-way coalition spanning the political spectrum, though key leaders have differing preferences, making negotiations complex. Meanwhile, Wilders has conceded defeat but repeated baseless claims of voting irregularities rejected by the Electoral Council, which confirmed that the results were reliable and that no irregularities occurred. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Sander van Hoorn. He's a former EU correspondent, joins us live from Amsterdam. Thank you very much, Sander, for joining us again. Good to see you. As last week in our discussion, you did mention that it's going to be around Friday or a week later from our last discussion. And now here we are, and Jetten has won. What was your reaction? And now that they have a D66 party also has 26 seats, and the Wilders party also has 26 seats. What's your reaction?
Well, the Kiesraad body that officially counts the votes has ruled that D66 is 30,000 votes, so it's a small margin bigger than Geert Wilders' PVV, so that gives him the lead in the negotiations for a coalition. And I think what we have heard today is pretty much in line with the predictions based on the vote counting that was made late last week. So it's now up to Rob Jetten with his D66 party to form a coalition government. And what I hear around me, Dutch population wants it to be fast. They say we have been without a functioning government for far too long. So whatever coalition is being made, do it fast.
Yes, and you know, this D66 party will have to have a four-way coalition spanning the political spectrum. How do you think it will be challenging to provide stable governance in this deeply fragmented parliamentary system? Or is there any risk of it becoming a fragmented and unstable, like current French government?
Well, the Dutch parliament has 150 seats, so ideally you need half plus one, which gives you 76 seats. There's a combination with the Christian Democrats, D66, and the more conservative liberals, the VVD. And if you add the Social Democrats, you have a big majority, 86 seats in parliament out of 150. But the conservative liberals have basically ruled out governing with the Social Democrats. So that leaves only one other combination with a more right-wing party, but that will give you only a 75-seat coalition, which is a bare minimum. You will have to negotiate about every topic, and if one vote out of those 75 of the coalition votes differently, then you don't have a majority. So that is not the preference of Rob Jetten. But this is the quagmire that he has to navigate the coming days and weeks. Somebody has been appointed to do preliminary investigation into the possibilities. And well, everybody is hoping that we will have a new government before Christmas, but the joke in The Hague is already, which Christmas do you mean? 2025 or Christmas 2026?
Right, which Christmas? Hopefully this Christmas. And now staying on this topic, what does Rob Jetten's narrow victory over Wilders reveal about the resilience and limits of populism in European politics now?
Because not only in the Netherlands but also in many other countries you have a far-right populist party vying for power. So if there's a trend that points the other way, that's eagerly embraced in Brussels. It has to be seen whether this new trend will take form in the place of a new coalition in the Netherlands. But also there's another reason that Europe eagerly awaits what happens here. The Netherlands is one of the founding fathers of the European Union, is part of any treaty that is surrounding the European Union. So a Dutch government in turmoil is not something they like in Brussels. So also there the imperative is whatever you do, do it fast. Give us a functioning government as soon as possible. So Brussels and the Dutch population are more or less in line with that statement.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Sander van Hoorn for joining us as a former EU correspondent all the way from Amsterdam and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. China has commissioned its third aircraft carrier in the Fujian in a major step to modernize its naval fleet. The carrier has reportedly entered service this week at a naval port in China's southern province of Hainan. The Fujian is equipped with an electromagnetic aircraft launch system, allowing jets to carry larger payloads and more fuel. This technology previously only existed on the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is an elite aircraft carrier of the U.S. Navy. With the addition of the Fujian, China's Navy now includes 3 active carriers, joining the Liaoning and the Shandong as the country expands its presence in the Pacific. The carrier has underwent sea trials before entering active service. Looking at the geopolitical front, the Fujian has already sailed through the sensitive Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea for research and training missions. Its movements were last detected near the disputed Senkaku Islands with Japan. As per defense experts, the Fujian's launch surely reflects China's ambitions to project maritime power regionally, particularly around the South China Sea and Taiwan. Now for this discussion, we welcome Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how significant is this Fujian, knowing that it's the only naval power that can be competed or be in competition with the USS or US one? And how does this commissioning of Fujian alter the balance of naval power in the Indo-Pacific and with US?
Well, commensurate with China's status as the second largest economy in the world, and its trading and other geopolitical interests across the group, China needs to, of course, to develop its blue water navy. But the trajectory only began not too long ago, starting with the first aircraft carrier, which was converted from an old Russian model, disguised as a kind of business ship and brought back to China for study and then conversion. It was a very old aircraft with a kind of ski jump runway, which was no longer used decades ago by the United States. But then, since then, China has built now the second, which still use the ski jump model, but now the Fujian is the first aircraft with a platform, the flat platform, and using an advanced launching system, which is called the electromagnetic catapult system, which is being used by the most advanced aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford in the United States. And what is more, the electromagnetic catapult system on the Fujian is used to launch China's latest fifth generation fighters, the latest fifth generation supersonic and stealth fighters. This is the first, not yet tried even on the Ford. But however, in comparison with the United States, 11 aircraft carrier groups, China still is a pygmy. I mean, China, because all the 11 aircraft carrier battle groups of the United States are all nuclear powered. And China has not yet built any nuclear powered aircraft carrier, including the Fujian. I think that China is starting to build one, but it's not yet completed. And then this, of course, is only the third aircraft carrier, and then of course is complemented with its battle groups. But compared with the United States 11 battle groups, so it's still miles behind. China is slated to build about 6 aircraft carrier in total, and to build its first nuclear power aircraft carrier at the moment, but it's not yet completed. So I think that China's still miles away, but compared with what China's aircraft carrier fleet, say a couple of years or couple of maybe decades ago, of course, it's a vast improvement, and that improvement is necessary to protect China's sea lane of communication and all the conflicts over the South China Sea in China's near abroad.
Right. Thank you for giving us that insight. And also, looking at all the developments that you have mentioned and shared with us, how do you think, to what extent does this China's naval expansion represent defensive modernization versus an assertion of global military ambition?
As a large country with so many territorial disputes along its borders, and also its sea lane of communication, which supports its lifeblood of trade and import of materials, China needs to have a credible naval force, especially in the Asia Pacific. As I said, it's still miles behind the United States 11 aircraft carrier groups, and that, of course, is seen to be threatening China's national security or economic security, because the South China Sea is, as I said, is a very important sea lane of communication for China's economic lifeblood. So I think that China will continue to develop its naval forces in defense of its own interests, especially along the South China Sea, and in the light of putting a coercive deterrence force against any attempts of Taiwan to seek formal independence.
And then how should neighboring states like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong respond to this China's growing military presence in contested waters like South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait without escalating the situation or tension?
I think that you should I think you make a mistake in mentioning Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is part of China, okay? So Hong Kong is a special administrative region. So Hong Kong is not, leave Hong Kong out of it. Hong Kong, of course, is part of the motherland. But as far as China's neighbors are concerned, it's of course is seeing a kind of threat because they, along with China, have their own territorial claims and have their own military considerations along the South China Sea. And as far as Japan is concerned, of course, it's constrained by its constitution, which was forced upon it after Japan's defeat after the Second World War. And now that there are political forces in Japan trying to revise the constitution so that Japan can become a normal country, and with developing its naval projection forces. I think that the Korea, of course, is more concerned about the North Korea and the security of the Korean Peninsula, because basically the aircraft carrier is a force projection, but also it's a force protection area. So I think that, of course, China's continuing advances of its naval forces, aircraft carrier, even though it's for self-defense, as I outlined, is sealing the communication, but of course it will send ripples along its border with its neighboring countries.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Andrew K. Long for joining us as a China strategist all the way from Hong Kong and sharing that insight. Now we stay in the region. The Philippines is on high alert as it braces for another powerful storm, Typhoon Phang Vong. Just days after being hit by Typhoon Kalmaegi, the weather radar showed Phang Vong forming off of the east coast of the island nation. The storm is expected to intensify into a super typhoon before making a landfall in the northern Philippines by November 9th or on November 10th early in the morning. The country's Civil Aviation Authority has already placed all area centers and airports under alert as Phang Vong approaches. Authorities continue to monitor the situation closely as they prepare for the impact of yet another devastating storm. Now we move on to Africa. Tanzanian rights groups have condemned widespread reports of reprisal, killings and mass arrests following last week's presidential election, which the opposition has denounced as sham. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner with 98% of the vote in a poll from which most opposition parties were barred. The Legal and Human Rights Center, along with 6 other NGOs, have said security forces used excessive force against unarmed protesters, including killings inside people's homes. Activists say hundreds, possibly thousands, were killed during the unrest, with many more detained without bail. A 6-day internet shutdown has also obstructed the flow of verified information. Election observers from the African Union and other groups have criticized the vote as a compromised, saying Tanzanians were denied the ability to freely express their democratic will. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.